Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, cool. So what I got here is I have the round two, match two, round one game between Levon Aronian, Wesley. So we're hoping for no mouse slips today. They're pretty deadlocked, so we're gonna see what unfolds for the rest of the match. They are in the process of playing the third game in this match. So I'm just kind of following and seeing what we got going on. For all my people from the Philippines, magandang umaga, maayong buntag, aking mga kaibigan and higala, kamusta na to you guys. Appreciate you guys coming by and stopping by and taking a look. For all of my people that are from Armenia or who do speak Armenian, Vogjuven to you and merci for coming by and taking a look at my video. Appreciate it very much. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look, see what we got for the game. Let me make sure my volume is up. All right, cool. We got d4, knight to f6, knight to f3. Got d5, bishop f4. So we have a London. We got c5, e3. Knight comes to c6. We have knight b to d2. We got bishop to g4. We got c3, e6. Queen comes to b3. You know, of course, whenever you have the bishop moving away, you do sometimes want to tickle this pawn. We got queen to c8. Knight comes to h4. That might look kind of weird because you're like, wait a minute, why are you just going to put the knight over here on the rim? It becomes clear in a second. Bishop comes to e7. We see h3. Bishop to h5, g4, bishop to g6, and we take on g6 with the knight. And then pawn takes h6 or g6 with the h pawn. So it becomes clear now. You know what white is trying to do is it's trying to get rid of a bishop, and then also it's trying to damage the structure. So you know, white is doing pretty good here. They're just a little bit better structurally. You know, they have like a pretty secure pawn structure compared to black. So you see bishop to e2. More commonly, you're going to see bishop to g2. So you're just going to put this bishop on this long diagonal, which can be pretty beneficial for you. But we had bishop to e2 in the game. Pawn comes to a6. We see h4. You know, of course, we have this pawn protected. So we're looking to try to open some lines up here with h5. We see b5, bishop to g, or we see g5, sorry. Knight comes to d7. We see king to f1. Because of the closed nature of the position, there are not a lot of lines open. It's not so bad for the king not to castle. So we see knight to a5, and we actually see queen. We see queen to c2 in the game. We see pawn takes d4, e takes d4. Now, if we back up here, if you guys want to go ahead and pause the video and see what white has at their disposal in this position instead of queen to c2, go ahead and do so real quick. All right, cool. So it was kind of a trick question. The move that white can actually play in the position, it's not like crazy better than what they actually played in the game, but there is a point that I want to make as far as this particular move goes. So the move is actually queen to d1. Now, the reason why queen to d1 is just slightly better than queen to c2 is it greatly increases your possibilities. So if you go queen to c2, after pawn takes, you have to take back with the e-pawn. Because as you can see, this queen is undefended and is pinned, right? Like this pawn is pinned to the queen. But if we move queen to d1, we have bishop and rook both protecting the queen. And we have the option to take back with either pawn, you know, whichever pawn we deem is better. So what I want to, like, the reason why I stopped it there is I want you guys to remember, like, when you're playing your own games, when you're thinking, when you're attacked, like, you know, say a rook or a queen or something, like a important piece is attacked, you always want to, like, it's not always relevant, but for a majority of the time, you do want to make sure that you're retreating to a safe square, like where you're protected, maybe connecting yourself to a pawn or putting yourself in a position to where you're not going to be hanging your piece. It just gives you more options, and usually it helps you not just lose the piece outright. So that's why I had you guys stop that. So moving on here, we saw queen to c2, pawn took the e-pawn. We see queen to c6. So as you can see, black is kind of caught up a little bit positionally. You know, they're doing pretty good. You know, the The white king is not like, you know, it's not crazy horrible, just because, like I said, the position is still somewhat closed. So the king is not in any immediate danger. So we see h5, bishop to d6, bishop comes down to e3. We got pawn takes h5, rook takes h5, rook takes h5, bishop takes h5. We see g6 and then bishop down to f3. So the difference in the position is white does have the bishop pair. It's not so influential in this particular position simply because there aren't a lot of open lines. And that's something that you really want when you have the bishop pair is open lines, because then your bishops can just like kill the entire board. So we see king to e7 and we see a4. You know, white is attempting to try to open the game up some, like I said before, is, you know, for their bishops. So we see knight to c4, pawn takes b5, attacking the queen. So that's important. Because, you know, you can't just trade here, of course, or here. Actually, you could trade here. This is with a check. So that was definitely a possibility. But we see pawn taking b5, rook taking a8, queen taking a8. We see knight takes c4, and then pawn takes c4. We got b3, knight coming to b6. We have bishop to e2. Queen goes to h8. And this is a really nice move. Because, as you guys can see, if the queen makes it down here, this is just checkmate in one. So this is a very significant threat. So the king comes to e1. We have queen to c8, and then we see actually pawn takes c4 in the game, knight takes c4, and then we see bishop takes c4. But if we back up here, something that was probably a little bit better was to actually go queen to a2, because then now you kind of pass the question back to black, like, hey, you know, what do you want to do? You know, and then of course, you know, if you see something like this is just going to be helping white because you're opening these lines. And getting the bishops a little bit more activated. So that's what we want to try to, you know, you always want to think like whenever it's a possibility to take, sometimes it's better to let your opponent take. It just improves your position a little bit. So stay away from those automatic trades. It's easier said than done. But like I said, we see knight takes, bishop takes, and we see queen taking c4. We got king to d2, king to f8. Now we have a lot of maneuvering going on in this position. We have the same color bishops. You can argue that black's pawn structure is just a little bit better because they do have all of their pawns on light squares. Usually when you get into an endgame and you have a certain color bishop, you want to put your pawns on the opposite color. That way your bishop has like complete movability. But like I said, we'll go ahead and run through these moves. So we got queen to b1, we got king to g7, queen comes to b6, we got queen to a2 with check, king to d3, we got bishop to h2, queen to d8, with the clear intention of putting the queen here on f6. So in response to that, we see queen to b1. The king comes down to d2, queen to b2 with check, king to d3. Queen comes down to b1 with check. The king comes back down to d2, queen to f5. So it's possible that we just kind of repeated the position a couple times just to gain time. As you guys know, they are playing 15-minute games. So, you know, it is pretty beneficial to maybe repeat the position twice. Just to kind of gain a little bit of time, you know, help you later on. So we got king to e2. Queen comes to c2 at check. We have bishop to d2. And you got to be very careful here. You don't want to try to pin the bishop here because you do have check here. And then this is going to be winning the entire bishop. So be careful with pinning immediately. Queen comes to e4 with check. We see bishop to e3. Queen goes to g4. We see king to d2. Bishop to f3, or queen to f3, queen to e7, queen to f5, king to e2, king to h7, queen to f6. We got queen taking f6, queen taking f6, or pawn taking f6, sorry. We have king to g8, we have king to d3, we have king to f8, we got c4, king to e8, f3, d7, king to d7. We have bishop to g5. We have king to c6, king to bishop to d2, bishop to c7, bishop to g5, bishop to g3, king to c3, bishop to f2, bishop to f4, bishop to h4, bishop to e5, pawn takes c4, king takes c4. We have bishop to g5, king to c3, king to d5, king to d3, bishop to h4, king to c3, bishop to e1. We see king to d3, bishop to a5, bishop to f4. We got bishop to b6, bishop to e5. So even though, as far as white is concerned, they pretty much have what is called a tall pawn, I forgot what book I was reading, but the author, it was either Mark Dvorsky or Jeremy Silman, which is a very good, in-game book writer. He basically called a bishop that's connected, anchored to a pawn and kind of supporting another pawn, even there's another pawn here, as a tall pawn. So it kind of doesn't even have the bishop qualities anymore. It's just kind of just like a pawn. So even though that white has what looks like it's a worse bishop, they are doing fairly well because there really isn't a good way to break this structure down as black. This bishop is holding this pawn, so it's not capturable, and the king cannot penetrate in here. You can push pawn, push this pawn and then take here. There's really not a whole lot you can do to change the structure. So we see bishop back to d8, king comes to c3, bishop to a5 with check, king comes to d3, bishop to b4, bishop to f4, bishop to e1, bishop to e5, bishop to f2, king to c3, bishop to e1, king to d3. And it is in this position that the players agree to a draw. It's possible they've repeated position 3 times. I'm not sure. But as you guys can see, there's just not a way to make progress for either side. So it is drawn. So like I said, I'm following the rest of the tournament. I'm trying to see if we can't get a nice little game left. Like I said, they are playing the 3rd game now of the 2nd match. So I'm gonna see what that game looks like. See if I want to present that game. I wanted to grab and get you guys something. I appreciate you guys coming by. Maraming Salamat Po, King Ibegan, and merci for all of my people that are speaking Armenian. And I'll see you guys next time. All right.